Chapter 3, Close Encounters. If the government has been covering up Watergate, then their handling of UFOs is a cosmic Watergate. J. Allen Hynek. While multitudes are convinced that we're being visited by cosmic travelers, millions of others view UFOs as nothing more than a hoax. To them, the evidence offered by people around the world is too incredible to believe. Even on the official level, doubt prevails. Despite this skepticism, the UFO controversy has proven one thing. Neither the state nor the science can explain the phenomena. Unwilling to admit their failure, many have resorted to the simple expediency of denying that UFOs exist. Pause for my own commentary. As you know, our mainstream media are now confirming the existence of UFOs, off-world vehicles, and even the latest, I believe it might have been Tucker Carlson, Fox News, but mainstream media, doesn't matter which mainstream media, actually has confirmed that people that said they were abducted have had unexplained pregnancies. They do never mention any births or whatever, so just throwing that in there, because remember, this book was written in the 70s. Many of the scientists on the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico will no doubt disclaim any belief in UFOlogy. But words found there scribbled by an unknown hand on a restroom wall may well be nearer to the core of truth. I saw a disc up in the air, a silver disc that wasn't there. 2 more weren't there again today. Oh, I wish they'd go away. Finding themselves unable to deny the phenomena completely, other scientists have resorted to various rational or semi-rational arguments. Some assert that witnesses of UFOs are mistaken. Others have explained them as optical illusions, plasma discharges, swamp gas, or the reflection of the sun through thin ice fog. Many opt for a simpler solution. UFOs are nothing other than secret military spacecraft designed and operated by one of the superpowers. If one could get close enough to one of these flying saucers and be able to read the markings, he would no doubt see made in the USA or made in the USSR. And this too would explain the official government's silence on the subject. It is nothing other than Washington's cosmic cover-up, according to one author. Major Murphy, a former high official in the U.S. intelligence, suggests that UFOs are not spacecraft at all, but rather psychotronic devices. He holds that during World War II, the Germans were doing advanced research on controlled electrical discharges and controlled lightning, and tried to combine the two. He also claims that the scientists were working on circular aircraft and were hoping to develop a new and secret weapon. In an interview with Jacques Vallée, Major Murphy said, when we invaded Germany, a lot of hardware fell into our hands, but the Russians had gotten most of the good stuff. It was soon after this that people started seeing UFOs. 1946 in Sweden and 1947 in America. Are UFOs for real? All suggestions and theories to the contrary. The reality of UFOs is becoming increasingly obvious. No theory has been able to dispense with the evidence for their existence. The space vehicles simply will not go away. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, chairman of the Astronomy Department of Northwestern University, tells us that there is sufficient evidence to suggest we are not alone. What adds to Dr. Hynek's credibility is that he was at one time a noted skeptic himself. But now, after intensive and exhaustive research, he concludes that most UFO reports are from reliable, excellent witnesses. When I first got involved in this field, I was particularly skeptical of people who said they had seen UFOs on several occasions, and totally incredulous about those who claimed to have been taken aboard one. But I've had to change my mind. Others have experienced a similar change of mind. When the prestigious American Astronomical Society conducted a survey of its members, an impressive 53% said that UFOs certainly or probably should be investigated further. When a sample poll of U.S. citizens was taken in the 1950s, only 3.4% believed in UFOs, and that they were manned by extraterrestrial beings. By 1978, that percentage has risen to 57%. What happened was undoubtedly this. Millions began, without outright disbelief, Then, as the data increased and more evidence became available, the disbelief dissolved into doubt. Later, as the data kept increasing, the evidence simply would not go away. The doubt turned to wonder. That seems to be the stage that multitudes have reached today. Unable on one hand to fully explain the evidence and unable on the other hand to explain it away, they are left suspended in a state of wonderment. Their situation is not unlike that described by Professor Houston Smith of Syracuse University. The larger the island of knowledge, the longer the shoreline of wonder. What is the evidence? What proof do we have that such an island of knowledge exists? What is this increasing evidence for the UFO phenomena? First, the sheer weight of the facts involved. No less than 15 million Americans, 11% of the adult population, claim to have seen a UFO. Among them was a former president of the United States, Jimmy Carter. He filed 2 reports of UFO sightings when he was governor of Georgia. Other notable men who were convinced that UFOs needed serious consideration were General Douglas MacArthur, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, Senator Barry Goldwater, Lester B. Pearson, former Prime Minister of Canada, Malcolm Muggeridge of England, and Thor Heyerdahl of Kon-Tiki fame. Considering the numbers involved, one should remember that 90% of the people who claim to have seen a UFO never report that fact. They belong to what Dr. Hynek calls the Legion of the Bewildered Silent. However, those who do report it average some 100 sightings every 24 hours. Dr. Hynek asserts that he now possesses a computer bank of 63,000 sightings. The Australian Computer Bank has passed the 80,000 mark, and that was in 1977. And even this may well be small compared with the files of Amy Michel, whose files on UFO sightings were so extensive that it took 4 years to analyze them in any detail. It should be added that many of these UFO sightings were viewed by dozens, hundreds, even thousands of people at the same time. During the numerous UFO landings in France in 1954, only 15% of the witnesses were alone at the time. All the others were multiple witness cases. It is also significant that independent evidence given by various groups which had never heard of each other agreed on a high percentage of facts and details. The truth is, according to Dr. Stanton T. Friedman, nuclear physicist and UFO researcher, that there is a close encounter of the third kind occurring somewhere on this planet every day. This is in addition to close encounters of the first and second kind. It would be strange indeed if all this evidence were the result of mass hysteria. Ian McLennan makes it clear when he says, hundreds of thousands of people cannot make independent observations of the same optical phenomena over thousands of square miles under a fantastic dose of mass hysteria. A typical example of a multiple witness sighting would be the one over Indianapolis, July 13, 1952. A huge oval-shaped space vehicle was seen racing over the city about 5,000 feet above the ground and witnessed by thousands of spectators at the same time. Suddenly, the switchboards at police stations, newspaper offices, and the airport were swamped with frightened inquiries. If further corroboration were needed, Air Force radar had picked up a high-flying craft in the area just before the actual sighting. And for good measure, pilots from American Airlines, Eastern Airlines, and the U.S. Air Force testified to seeing this same object traveling at a fantastic speed. Are the witnesses reliable? Are the witnesses of UFOs reliable? Can they be trusted? Would their testimony hold up in court? The variety of witnesses is endless. They include civilians from every strata and society, not crackpots or lunatics, but rather normal men, family men, many of whom hold responsible positions in their communities. There are also numberless military witnesses from the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps, radar men, guided missile trackers, and ground troops, aeronautical engineers, airport traffic controllers, Weather Bureau observers, ground observer corps, members, astronomers, FBI agents, state, county, and city police, official photographers, plus private pilots and crews from American, United Eastern, Pan American, Northwest, Western, and Trans World Airlines are also on the list of witnesses. In the words of Dr. Clifford Wilson, to an unprejudiced investigator, it would have been hard to find a group better qualified to observe and report on UFOs. It is of significance that the same kind of descriptions are being given both by trained U.S. airline pilots and by half-civilized remote islanders from the four corners of the earth. Some of the witnesses had never heard of a flying saucer. An example would be Celeste Simonotti, an Italian working on a tiny island off the French coast, the Isle of Ré. As he was returning home on the night of September 30th, 1954, he saw a brilliant light. Thinking it was a fire, he hurried to the scene. What he saw was a luminous sphere, about 12 meters in diameter, floating less than 1 meter above the ground. The sphere became red, then blue, then took off vertically at extreme high speed. The interesting thing is this. When people told Celeste Simonuti he had seen a flying saucer, they had to explain to him what flying saucers were. He had never heard of them. He was an Italian living in France, spoke very little French, and never read a newspaper. One should also add that some of the witnesses were press reporters, a category of people who would traditionally be skeptical. Another class that can be described as traditionally skeptical would be scientists, interested only in hardcore data. Today, a number of these scientists have had to admit that they had to suspend their innate skepticism. One such skeptic, as already noted, is Dr. J. Allen Hynek. He was the official astronomical consultant to Project Blue Book. Insert here. My grandfather, Sergeant Henry J. LaCour, worked in Project Blue Book. He was a very Christian man, and he was a firm believer in the whole UFO phenomena. The U.S. instituted inquiry into the existence of UFOs. Dr. Hynek, a scientist of impeccable repute, headed the NASA-sponsored satellite tracking program at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In all, Dr. Hynek has spent more than 20 years studying the subject of UFOs. He describes his early skepticism. Before I began my association with the Air Force, I had joined my scientific colleagues in many a hearty guffaw at the psychological post-war craze for flying saucers that seemed to be sweeping the country, and at the naivete and gullibility of our fellow human beings who were being taken in by such obvious nonsense. To Dr. Hynek at that time, all talk about UFOs was nonsense and non-science. But the same Dr. Hynek, 20 years later, adopts a far different stance. It is no longer possible to sweep away the whole subject. It reminds me of the days of Galileo when he was trying to get people to look at the sunspots. They would say that the sun is a symbol of God. God is perfect, therefore the sun is perfect. Therefore spots cannot exist. Therefore there is no point in looking. Today he states quite categorically, I can establish beyond a reasonable doubt that they, UFOs, are not at all misperceptions of hoaxes. Another leading scientific specialist at the University of California recently stated, I know of no scientist who has become professionally involved with UFO investigation who doesn't believe in the extraterrestrial phenomena.